Hi, my name is Mike Ward. I'm the Global Director of Content at Informa Pharma Insights, and I'm here in Munich at the Bio Europe meeting, and I'm joined today by the Managing Partner of Forbion Captial Partners, Sander Slootweg. And thanks very much, Sander, for coming and talk to us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Sander, Forbion at the moment is raising a new fund.
Correct.
You've already had a couple of closes. How's it going?
Yeah, I think it's really picking up momentum. I think people have a sense that we're in a very interesting time in life sciences when, of course, in the US we've already seen the big sort of boom, and in Europe it's always a bit slower, so we're now still seeing a fair number of IPOs. So people have a sense that it's a segment of private equity where they would like to play in life sciences. So it's picking up. We had indeed a couple of closes, and we expect to round off the fundraising by around end of this year, early next year, for our third main fund.
So by the second close, you've raised how much?
120.
$120 million.
Euros.
120 million euros. Okay. And by the end of the year, you're hoping to sort of get that to where?
Between 150 and 200 million euros.
150, 200 million euros.
That would be the end.
And what is the sort of the investment focus for that fund?
Well, it's a continuation of our strategy of the previous two main funds. So we do about 70% in biopharma, 30% medtech, and with the last fund we also introduced diagnostics as a novel sort of category, where sometimes the diagnostics are more linked to a drug, i.e. a companion diagnostic. Right. Sometimes it's more like a desktop machine that you sell into a hospital where they can run several tests on. Then it's more in our medtech bucket, but that's about the strategy. And for biopharma, we invest still relatively early stage, so it could be late preclinical. On the medtech side, we invest more late stage, so just before CE mark approval typically, and then some of our money is also used to facilitate commercial rollout of product, mostly in Europe.
And is there a geographical focus where you'll invest?
70% Europe and 30% North America. At least historically we've done 30% North America, which also includes Canada, because we see some of the same characteristics in Canada as we see in Europe, that there is a sort of a mismatch between supply and demand for capital, whereas in the US I think there is less of that, and I think therefore prices are relatively higher for new investments in the US. Canada and Europe represent very good sort of hunting grounds, we find, for new investments.
And the limited partners that you're attracting, I mean, where are they coming from?
They're coming from all over the place. Well, not from Asia in our case, but mostly Europe and North America. We do see somewhat of a shift where in the past I think your main suspects were pension funds, insurance companies, banks. We spun out of a bank, a Dutch bank, ABN AMRO ourselves, in 2006. Now we see more of a focus towards wealthy families, so professional family office investors. And also in Europe there's a lot of sort of public impetus for our sector through European Investment Fund. Also more local initiatives, like in the Netherlands, we're based in the Netherlands. There is a fund called Dutch Venture Initiative, which is part provided for by the government. So I think it's a mix of still some institutional money, increased focus on family wealth, and some, I would say, more regional and European investment funds like EIF and DVI.
And I mean, you've raised money in the past. Mm-hmm. This time round, has it been any easier or any harder?
I should say it's been about the same. What did make the fundraising for us pick up substantially is we enjoyed one of our biggest exits to date when we sold the Informa Pharma to Amgen for up to $1.5 billion, where we're the biggest shareholder. So I think that has not gone sort of unrecognized, and a lot of people have since approached us, would like to join our new fund.
Right. So and the people who invested in your previous funds, did they also return? I mean, what yes, kind of retention?
A lot of returning investors, but what you always see is that you always have a turnover in the investor base for reasons not related to our performance, because people change strategies. For instance, I mentioned banks. Historically, banks have been investors in our sector, but I think they've now pretty much all pulled out, and so that's just more a strategic decision rather than anything to do with us specifically. But we have a pretty stable investor base now, and a lot of returning LPs.
Right. So you mentioned the kinds of companies you'll go for and what sort of stage that they will be in their development. What sort of role do you take? Will you be always the lead investor, or will you be co-investing with other people?
We always typically invest in syndicates where we like to take a leading role, so being the lead investor or a co-lead investor for that matter. Sometimes we're active in setting up the companies, especially if they're more like virtual development structures, more project organizations, as we did for the Informa Pharma. Or more recently, we were involved in setting up Replimune, which is kind of following the success of one of our other big exits, Biovex, where we got the band back together. We set up Replimune, which is also an oncolytic viral play, where where we're involved in the company formation. In other instances, we join an already existing company with a more mature management team, and so it depends from case to case whether it's an earlier stage involvement or helping the company really through a transformational phase.
And when you're creating companies, I mean, some of the companies you mentioned, they were trade sales. People like Biovex, etc. They were acquired by Amgen. Just successfully had their lead program approved by the FDA.
Yeah, last week.
What do you envisage when you're going into investment? I mean, what is your exit strategy?
Well, it depends. For the most part, we like to shorten the cycle of repaying back money to investors earlier, because I think most investors like life sciences, because if you're successful financially, it means you're also contributing to the lives of patients by coming up with new medical solutions. So people like that. But one of the complaints historically has been, but why does it take so long? Well, it takes long if you invest in a professor with a patent and you want to take this drug all the way to market. But if you're smart and you really time your investments, then you can, I think, shorten that cycle. So our aim is typically to invest in something and then exit in, say, 3 to 4 years after a company has reached a significant milestone, a value inflection point. Sometimes we deliberately take a bit longer if we really want to build a platform technology to the point where they will have several pharma partnerships, maybe will be listed, and then we take like a 5-year horizon. Example being, for instance, Unicure, where we have taken a bit of a longer horizon.
Right. Now, one of the sort of fashions in the sort of the VC world these days is to back asset-centric approaches rather than build companies. It sounds like you're still into building companies, or
we've done both. We've done both. So I think it's one of the toughest decisions sometimes if you really want to focus and develop one asset, one product. Sometimes it's easy because you in-license the product or pharma spins it out, so there is only one product. And sometimes there is the ability to invest in multiple product opportunities if something represents a platform. And then the decision is, do we develop something broadly or do we keep it focused? And sometimes you can change course of action along the way, but I think that's something that you really need to think about, because also the type of management you attract to the company, it depends if you really want a seasoned team that can do company building, or whether you want a solid project management organization that can effectively take the project from A to B. So that's something we both do, but it requires a lot of debate oftentimes if we really think something has it to become a full-fledged company platform opportunity.
Yeah. And the fund that you're raising at the moment, as you say, you've already got 120 million euros in the bank, but I understand you've actually already started investing some of that money. So could you sort of describe where some of that money's already going?
Yes, definitely. So I think one of the areas of focus is cardiovascular metabolic, also based on I think the Zima success. We think that there's still room for improvement of again patients' conditions. So one of the companies we've set up is a company focused on lowering triglycerides with taking an antibody approach. So I think that's developing well. It's an earlier stage investment. On the other end of the spectrum, we, for instance, invested in a medtech company called ATI, who have a neurostimulation solution to cluster headaches, which is already CE marked, and there it's more a commercialization play, while at the same time they're still getting their device licensed in the US, a PMA trial. So it's that whole spectrum from early stage to late stage commercialization.
And your previous funds, I mean, they're now sort of fully invested. What's happening to you've had some exits from your portfolio.
Absolutely.
What's happening to the companies in those portfolios? I mean, how are you able to support those?
Well, so I think, of course, we always take a conservative approach to reserving, because in life sciences you never know through how many rounds you need to finance companies and whether by the time you plan your exit, public markets will be receptive or not. So we're conservative, but we also are opportunistic that if we have a number of later stage opportunities in one of the more mature funds, then typically we've raised what we call co-investment funds around these opportunities, where we pretty much collect then this money from our existing LPs, allowing them to, in this way, deploy more money in the later stage de-risked companies, kind of double up on the winners, if you will, which has been a very successful concept. So we have just about a month ago raised our third co-investment fund at 75 million euros, which is earmarked to be invested in 6 kind of predetermined Fund 2 portfolio companies, existing portfolio companies.
Right. Okay, well, Sander, thanks very much for joining us, and good luck with the rest of the fundraising.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Yeah.